You're not supposed to find a letter like this. Not under a frozen body in January 1945, buried beneath rubble in the outskirts of a town that no longer exists. But someone did. A Red Army infantryman, clearing debris in what had once been the German city of Kustrin, kicked aside a collapsed timber and spotted something. Not a weapon, not a map, but a folded piece of paper wrapped in oilcloth, tucked into the breast pocket of a corpse wearing a tattered Wehrmacht coat. No identification tags, no rank insignia, just this letter, sealed, untouched by fire or blood. And when it was finally translated, decades later, it was not a farewell to family or a prayer to God. It was a warning, a confession, a crack in the official memory of a dying Reich. The handwriting is frantic, but deliberate. To whomever finds this, do not believe the medals, do not believe the orders. We were not men, we were witnesses. What follows is a first-person descent into a kind of horror the history books glance over. Not in denial, but in exhaustion. The writer, known only by the initial E, describes his station in the 12th Infantry Division, posted near the Eastern Front in late 1944. He speaks not of battles, but of whispers. Units moved without explanation, officers with blank eyes, entire platoons reassigned overnight after discovering something buried in the woods near Bar. He details a man named Fisher, a chaplain who stopped speaking after a midnight interrogation and was later found having hung himself using signal wire. His final note reading only, "They came before us. This wasn't desertion. It wasn't madness. It was silence imposed by something deeper than fear, a recognition that what they were killing and dying for no longer had shape." In one chilling passage, E writes, "They told us the fatherland was eternal, but eternity is exactly what I saw in those ruins. I saw bones too long for men, rooms with no doors, a symbol burned into the snow, like an eye, but facing inward. Was it delusion? War does that. Bends the mind, unhinges the soul. But the terrifying part isn't that he might have imagined it. It's that he described details that matched reports buried in Soviet intelligence files from the same period. Mentions of inhuman structures uncovered during artillery digs, of operatives going mad after exposure to certain symbols carved into village wells, things that were redacted with such urgency that even the KGB clerks who stamped them were later transferred. And yet this letter survived, smuggled west by a Polish archivist during the collapse of the US. It lay dormant in a university basement until a grad student stumbled on it in 2002. She read it, she translated it, and 2 months later, she was found in her apartment, windows covered, having scrawled the same phrase across the walls in black ink. "They are still watching us through the snow." The autopsy ruled it suicide. No drugs, no history of instability. Just fear. Unreasonable, unrelenting fear. And when you read the letter, really read it, that fear seeps into you, because he wasn't trying to justify what he did. He wasn't seeking absolution. He was trying to warn us. Not of bombs, not of fascism, but of the cost of denying what you see when history fractures. He ends the letter with a line that chills the marrow. "I will end myself before they erase me. But if you find this, remember, not all monsters wear skulls on their caps. Some wear silence. Some wear memory." There is no record of the 12th Infantry's presence in Kustrin during January 1945. No military logs, no deployment charts. It's as if they were never there. But the letter was, the body was, and now, the silence isn't holding. The only question left is whether you believe it, and if you do, whether you can live with what that belief demands. Because once you've looked into the face of a forgotten truth, it does not look away. You weren't meant to know his name. Not officially. But the archivist who smuggled the letter out of Warsaw, a man listed in university payrolls as Janusz Kowalski, left behind more than scanned pages and faded carbon copies. Chaos is fertile ground. For cruelty, for secrets, for experiments hidden under the guise of research. The letter suggests that E was not part of a combat division, but a containment unit, a term unheard of in Wehrmacht vocabulary. He mentions being ordered to observe architectural anomalies and abandon villages west of Minsk, structures with no entry, no exit, and no decay. Inside one, he describes what appears to be a well, but filled not with water, nor stone, but with a fog that never moved. A corporal reached toward it. He was pulled inside. No sound, no trace, only his boots left behind, neatly placed. He left one single reel, unlabeled, except for the numbers 113, scratched into its plastic spine. The contents were never publicly released, but transcripts surfaced in leaked forums, dismissed by authorities as fabrications by fringe enthusiasts. Yet those who've read them, or worse, heard them report a sensation that words like unnerving or disturbing cannot touch. They speak of a voice breaking down in slow collapse, each sentence heavier than the last, as Janusz reads excerpts from the soldier's letter aloud. Then, around the 12-minute mark, he pauses. Not for breath, not for emphasis, but because of something we cannot hear. A silence so deep it's described as pulling the room inward. Then, Janusz mutters a phrase, not in Polish, not in German, but something else entirely. Linguists later argued it was closest to Basque syntax, though no matching root could be confirmed. The phrase, when phonetically reconstructed, translates loosely to, "It does not forget its shape." After that, the tape ends in static, not white noise, but a patterned rhythm, similar to shortwave broadcasts from number stations during the Cold War. Meaningless coincidence. Consider this. Janusz disappeared within a week of mailing the package. His apartment was found locked from the inside, untouched. The tape recorder still sat on the table, warm. His coat was gone, but outside, in the snow, no footprints led away, only toward. And still, this is not about superstition. This is about the war, or more precisely, what the war allowed. This was not symbolic. This was not a metaphor. E's writing is too plain, too exhausted. There's no flourish. He doesn't try to convince. He simply states. After that, we were not permitted to look down. Orders came not from Berlin, but through encrypted dispatches from an entity listed only as Abteilung V, which does not exist in any known German military structure. Cross-referencing Soviet archives reveals that around the same time, the Red Army intercepted encrypted transmissions containing phrases like Verbindung jenseits der Struktur and geometrische Buikengeseket. This is where the horror shifts from personal to institutional. Not a single man descending into madness, but an entire machine trying to record and bury a reality it did not understand. And here's the terrifying truth. They may have succeeded. The towns mentioned by Ekron and Dolznik, vs. not as villages, nothing. Digital satellite images of the coordinates show only black shadows, not missing data, just an absence, a smooth nothing, as if the earth had been told to forget. And still, the letter survives. Not just as artifact, but as echo, because those who read it, truly read it, begin to describe similar dreams. But why, then, did so many people who encountered the letter go missing, or fall silent, or die in ways no investigator could explain? Why did an entire Soviet unit go dark, trying to reach Dolz? Why was the only return transmission a single word, repeated 6 times? Zurückkehren, a tunnel that twists just slightly wrong, a whisper from behind a corner that isn't there. One postdoctoral student in Vienna, researching the document, began drawing maps in his sleep, perfect top-down renderings of buildings he had never seen, matching 1943 aerial photos of Kranen, the same building described by E, the one that hummed. You may be tempted to believe this is fiction, that E never existed, that war destroys memory, and this is just another fragment. And what, exactly, were they returning from? You think war ends with gunfire, with treaties, with silence, but some wars bleed inward, into the soil, into the mind. That's what the letter teaches you, if you read beyond the horror. He walks through trenches filled with ash, but above him the sky is a ceiling of stone. It curves, it breathes. From its center, a single eye blinks, not open or closed, but something. And why does the letter read like both testimony and trap? Because there's something in it that pulls you in. You reread certain lines, they stick in your mind. You start dreaming differently. The historian who catalogued the letter in Prague disappeared in 2007. Her diary, recovered years later, ends with a single line. They never taught us what happened beneath the orders. When he wakes, the dream has written itself onto his arm. Not words, not wounds, but a pattern of bruises in the shape of a spiral. His comrade Otto, a medic, sees it and begins weeping uncontrollably. Later, Otto is shot in the head by an officer after attempting to dig into the snow with his hands, screaming, "It's underneath us." It remembers, because somewhere beneath the soldier's terror is something more dangerous. Recognition, not just of fear, but of participation, of guilt. E doesn't deny what he did. He confesses to torching a farmhouse after orders were given in static-filled radio code. Inside, he found no resistance fighters, circles carved into the floor. Not pagan symbols, not runes, but perfect spirals, precise beyond tools, etched into bone fragments. Not human, he writes. Too light, too hollow. When broken they sang. No one spoke of it. They burned the structure. The screams were not from the house. They were from the radios, turned off, disconnected, yet alive with a sound that wasn't static, but rhythm. Morse? No. Morse ends. This continued, even after the flames. That night, E describes a dream. You ask, remembers what? That's the central question. What did they disturb? What was it the Reich tried to suppress? Not just from the world, but from history itself. Because what he reveals is a layer of war beyond tactics. A war not for territory, but for narrative. For control of what is allowed to be real. He writes of events he doesn't remember. His last known entry is dated 4 days before his Unit's official destruction, and yet he describes the moment of their annihilation in detail. The artillery. This is not a story about Nazis or Soviets or battles. This is a story about what war opens, when the machinery of death grinds deep enough to strike something older than nations, something that wears memory like a mask, if its words are not a warning, but an invitation. The collapse. The snow that turned black before it melted. How unless he'd already seen it. Unless time, within that zone, was not a line, but a spiral folding back on itself. And he was breaking, not because of guilt, but because something beneath the war was watching him through his uniform. He mentions a place, a bunker, but not German, not Soviet, older, found half buried in a clearing. The walls were curved inward, like a throat. The floor was too warm. The doors sealed from the inside, yet it had no handle. Inside, no signs of habitation, only dust, undisturbed, and in the center, a metal orb, humming with a pitch that made their teeth ache. They were ordered to report nothing. The officer in charge, Major Shadler, shot 3 men who asked questions. Then, 2 days later, shot himself. No explanation, just a note that read, "The spiral has no end. Here's the convergence." After this incident, he begins to lose time. Now connect the dots. The units, the erased towns, the strange symbols in the architecture, the dreams, the suicides, the absence of records, and the final twist. You start to wonder if this letter was meant to be found, because as you trace the spiral with your eyes, you realize something horrifying. It is not pointing inward. It is pointing outward. You've come this far, and now you feel it too, don't you? That tightening in the chest, not fear, not exactly, but that uncanny sense that something has shifted behind the curtain of your understanding. Most of it reads like drier academic prose. Until Appendix C. There, she cross-references Z's letter with a series of intercepted Nazi dispatches dated March 19, listing coded phrases like Schwarzfeld often, black field open, and subject D, spiral negative. These weren't combat reports. They were containment logs. Buried under military euphemism, they catalogued breaches. Not from enemies, but from within certain zones. But the words remain legible. They say the Reich fell, but not everything that served it was human. Not everything obeyed flags. Some things wore time like a jacket, and when the killing opened the ground deep enough, they came up. That history, as you were taught, was never complete. That certain chapters weren't just lost. They were buried, deliberately, violently. And what if this letter, this dying man's confession, wasn't the first? Because if E's final passages are accurate, then the spiral he describes wasn't just a pattern, but a principle, a rule, a force. What if it was merely the last one allowed to surface? Because in 2015, a researcher from Göttingen University named Dr. Lena Vogt compiled a study titled Nonlinear Testimony in Post-War Confessionals. And the strangest part, each report ends with the same phrase. Die Linie darf nicht brechen. The line must not break. That line, is it literal, metaphorical, temporal, or perhaps even architectural? His final paragraph is the most disturbing. His handwriting breaks. Ink trails into curves. And then, the final line, scrawled at the page's bottom. Sideways. I don't know if I am still me. Let that sit. What would it mean for a man to question if he is still himself? And what would it mean if that uncertainty was contagious? Because here, It's what the most recent wave of unofficial researchers have started to uncover. References to the same spiral symbol, not just in Germany or Belarus, but in reports from Cambodia in 1971, in sketches found in a POW camp in Korea, 1952, even in drone footage near the ruins of an abandoned French village dated back to the First World War, where no one remembers a battle occurring. Always the same spiral, always associated with vanishing, collapse, madness, and always hidden until someone dies, or speaks, or forgets. So now you're asking, what is it? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe it's not a thing. Maybe it's a structure, a kind of machine, not of gears and wires, but of narrative, a loop that feeds on blood, memory, and the silence that comes after unspeakable acts. The more war, the more death, the deeper the spiral cuts. And every once in a while, someone like E gets too close. Not by choice, but by accident, by orders they never understood. Because the spiral doesn't end, it loops, it waits, and it only needs one more observer to look too closely. By standing too near the hole in the world where history itself begins to rot. That's what he saw. That's what he tried to warn you about. But we ignored him. We redacted. We filed him away as a casualty. And in doing so, we may have done exactly what it wanted. Because now it knows you're listening. And once that happens, once you've traced the spiral in your mind, it begins again. So ask yourself, was this just a letter, or was it a door? And if you've already stepped through it, tell me, what did you leave behind?